This is James Lupton, delighted to be joined once again with Jackie Kallen. Jackie, how are you?
I'm wonderful. So good to talk to you always.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. This time, you're now a Hall of Fame inductee. Let's start there. First of all, congratulations. How does it feel?
I'm really, really excited about it. It's sort of the pinnacle of our business to get into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And as a female boxing manager, um, there haven't been any inducted, obviously, ahead of me. So I just wondered if I was ever going to get recognized for that. And then I got the call, and it was like, just so satisfying and gratifying, to know that I was being validated for what I've done all these years. It's been 45 years now that I've been involved in boxing. That's a long time. So I'm getting older, and I thought, am I ever going to get into that Hall of Fame? And here we are. So I'm real excited.
I can imagine. Obviously, let's go back 45 years ago. You was a journalist. You went into the gym, I think, with Tommy Hearns for the first time you got involved in boxing. And you just sort of, I think you was writing a report for the paper on Thomas Hearns. And all of a sudden, you're involved in boxing and never left the sport. Did you think all that time ago when you first thought, I'll take these few steps into boxing and make this move? Did you ever think it was going to end up like it has done now, 45 years later?
Oh my goodness, no, there wasn't even a boxing Hall of Fame back then. I think that's been around 35 years, and I was already in the business 10 years before they even thought of the Hall of Fame. So I don't think I ever thought of the future when I got into the sport. I was just enjoying it day by day, fighter by fighter, challenge by challenge, and I don't think I really thought ahead. I know that in different businesses, obviously, if you're in music, you look for a Grammy and you look for awards, and if you're in Hollywood, you look for an Oscar or an Emmy. But in boxing, that was never something that I aspired to attain. It was just there, and then all the greats like Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and Larry Holmes and all Sugar Ray Leonard and all the other fighters started getting inducted one after another, year after year. And just to know that my name will be up there with all those great, great names in the sport is a legacy for my children and grandchildren. When I'm not here, they can certainly go to Canastota and see that I'm there with the rest of them. So it's wonderful.
Absolutely. Talk to me about the pride you have now. You look back now on your career you've had and still going as well. You're still managing fighters and advising fighters. And obviously now this recognition and this accolade that you're getting of being inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, does this fill you with the greatest pride you've had in your career?
Well, I think it's definitely a milestone. It's the kind of recognition that you get from your peers. And knowing that the other people in the sport, when they saw my name on the ballot, thought enough to vote me in is a real compliment. And I imagine the voters are mostly male. And that was the point I had to get to, and get the respect of the men to kind of get in this old boys club, which is boxing. So to know that now, all these years later, it was mostly men that put me in the Hall of Fame, and they were the ones that kind of gave me um, problems at the beginning. That's even better, to know that you finally got accepted. And I think I was accepted long before this, but this is like the frosting on the cake. And of course, I still love boxing so much, and I'm still working with fighters. And since this Hall of Fame announcement, more and more fighters have gotten a hold of me that are looking for management. So I guess if I wanted to, I could start another whole stable. But right now, I'm focusing on my Quan Williams, who is 20-0 and two draws right now. And he just had an amazing knockout win. And so I'm real proud of him, and really working towards getting him his title shot. And then Sam Rizzo, a fighter I have here in Detroit. And so right now I'm focusing on that. Plus, I think we talked about it before, but I do a lot of motivational speaking. I travel around, I talk to different groups, and I love doing that. And there's an author there in the UK, Peter Mann. I know you're not over there, but from England, and who has written an authorized biography on me that's coming out in a couple months, and I'm looking forward to that. And there's always so many new challenges, new goals to set, but I'll never leave boxing. As long as I can still function mentally and physically, I will always be involved in the sport that I love.
Are you still as hungry now as you was 45 years ago when you entered boxing?
Absolutely. Nothing has changed. There's nothing as fulfilling as taking a young athlete who's just starting out and building his career, building it fight by fight, level by level, from a 4 round to a 6 round to an 8 round fighter. And then finally his first 10 round fight and his first title, and all the little steps that go into making a young kid a world champion. There's nothing like it. It's like being the idol maker. It's like being Spengali. It's being able to create something. And I take it so seriously because it's a responsibility. If a young fighter is going to put his career in my hands, I have to be very enthusiastic and I have to be very hungry, or else I would not be giving him 100%. And once I don't give 100% anymore, then I probably shouldn't do it. But I'm just as hungry now as I was at the beginning.
Obviously, you're probably best known for your work with Thomas Hearns and with James Toney as well, and they're a big part of one of the reasons as to why you're now inducted into the Hall of Fame. But just looking back on your career, what are your personal highlights? What are your favorite memories from your career?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's a lot of them, but if I had to like pick my top memories, obviously the years with Tommy Hearns and I are like brother and sister. We have been since 1978 very, very close friends, and he really is like a brother. I see him all the time. We live very close to each other. So I'll pick him up, we'll go to lunch or we'll go to a fight together, or we'll go out to dinner. And his kids and my kids, and we both have grandchildren now, and we've kind of gone through so many stages of life and career together for these 45 years that all my memories of his big fights, all of the Leonard fights, the Hagler fight's not my favorite memory because he didn't win, but those 3 rounds were so exciting. His fight with Duran, when he knocked him out, Duran just went, Phew. And that was just an exciting night because that was the one time he let me go in the ring and hold up his belt and walk around the ring. I felt like a ring card girl, but it was fun. My one and only time of doing that. And that's a great memory. And then with James Toney, I mean, so many memories because for 6 years he practically lived with me, and he and my boys were together all the time. So it was like I had 3 sons. If we went on a vacation, we took him, and he was just part of the family. And in 1991, in May, when we went to Davenport, Iowa to fight Michael Nunn, 20-1 underdog. Nobody really thought that we had a chance. I did, and Bill Miller, our trainer, did. But, the writers said, no way. First of all, we were fighting Michael Nunn in his backyard, and that's always hard to do. And, Michael Nunn was the god then. He was staying in a suite in this beautiful hotel, and we were at this kind of dumpy little motel. And it was just all very strange, being the underdog to that degree. And then he got the 11th round left hook knockout. Unbelievable memory just to see him reach his goal in only 2.5 years of working together was amazing.
Was that the most satisfying victory you was involved in because you're such a big underdog with the bookmakers?
The what?
Was that the most satisfying victory that you was involved in because he was such an underdog with the bookmakers?
Well, I just had the same situation recently with my Quan, my 140 pounder. We went to fight Luis Feliciano, and who is 18-0 undefeated, and we fought him on Pro Box, and Pro Box had just signed Feliciano to a 3-fight deal. He was the A side. They were really talking him up big, and we came there and knocked him out. And that's the kind of moments that stick in your mind, because the fights that you're not supposed to win that you win are the really exciting ones. When you go into a fight knowing that 80% of the odds in your favor, that you're fighting a guy that is basically there to help build your fighter's record, there's not that same satisfaction. But when you go there and sort of slay the dragon, nothing feels better than that. So, and I'm not afraid to take those chances. And there are a lot of managers that really are very cautious. And, back in the day, the best fought the best. That was how we had the Four Kings and all the great fights that we had in the golden era of boxing. And then as we got into the 2000s and, and now, in the 2020s, the fighters are a lot more careful who they fight. They don't want their O to go. So they will rather fight a guy 16-4 than a guy 20-0. Now, for me, I'm going to study both those guys. And in some cases, the guy 16-4 is more dangerous because the 4 losses were to really good fighters. And the guy 20-0 has a good record, but he fought nobody. So you have to kind of look at records and analyze fights and decide what's the right fight for your fighter at the right time. But being an underdog can sometimes be very exhilarating and a lot of fun when you go there as the B side and walk out of there as the winner.
I can imagine, absolutely. Jackie, I want to talk about a big fight coming up. You've been involved, you already mentioned a few super fights throughout your years in boxing. And I want to ask you about Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, but more in depth on the makings of a super fight. What goes on in behind the scenes? How does a super fight like this get made from a manager's perspective?
Those are the kind of fights that we sit down and usually there's 2 promoters because each fight, for the most part, unless it's a Don King fight where he has both fighters, but in most cases there'll be 2 promoters. Each fighter has his promoter, and we'll sit down and we'll hammer out numbers. Well, who's the A side? Who's the B side? Who's getting the most money? Who's now it's altogether different than it used to be because now a lot of it is social media. Who has the most social media presence, who has the most followers, who's the one that's selling the fight. It used to be much more about the fighters and their records and their skill levels, but now with the Jake Pauls and the Logan Pauls and the difference in our sport, a lot of the purses are decided by your profile and how popular you are. Tyson Fury to me is always a draw. He's always exciting to watch. People love him. He sings, he dances, he's a character. So you want to see him. And I mean, this is going to be a very good test for him because he can't just fool around and go in there and just act a fool. He's got to really fight if he's going to win this one. So I think a lot of it's going to depend how hard each fighter trains. And you have to take every fight seriously because sometimes you underestimate your opponent. You think, he's nothing, I can beat him. And you don't train as hard, you don't spar as much, and you don't push yourself. And that's when you get caught because you weren't really prepared. So I'm hoping that Tyson will really take this seriously and really get hungry again and go out there and do what he has to do because he's so entertaining. What's your take on that fight? I always like to hear other people's opinions.
For me, it's the who's got a better boxing brain on the night. I think it's a real chess match. I think this is the best versus the best at heavyweight. I personally think, like I say, it'll come down to the minds rather than the game plan in terms of ability. Because I feel they're both very similar in ability. It's just really the size is the only difference between the two. Obviously, Fury is a lot bigger, going to be probably imagine a lot heavier than Usyk on the night, which will work in his favour and to his advantage. But then being a bit lighter on his feet will work to Usyk's advantage. So I think it comes down to the brain on the night.
I think a lot of fights from my experience in these 4.5 decades, it's been who wants it more? 2 guys get in the ring, they weigh in the same. They've both had pretty much the same training camp, same hours of sparring, same basic workup towards the fight. And then you climb in the ropes, and then it's who really wants it the most and who's willing to do whatever it takes to walk out of there with that win. And you see guys, like you say, it's so mental at that point. It is a chess game. And one wrong move and it's checkmate and you're in trouble. And so if you're a smart fighter, you'll go into a fight knowing that you have to outthink your opponent, not just outpunch him or outbox him. And I think this is going to be one of those fights, like you say, where who wants it more and who's willing to go that extra mile. So it'll be great. I love all the big fights because those are the fights that the fans really want. The big matchups, the Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, the matchups that the public wants. And those are the ones that obviously go to pay-per-view because people are willing to pay to see those fights. But some of the fights that are not pay-per-view are great fights that people just don't know about. And boxing's not what it used to be. We've talked about that. And it's not on network TV anymore. It's not even on cable anymore because Showtime and HBO are both done with boxing. So it's become a new model. You have to go to DAZN and the streaming companies to really watch it. And in a way that's lost certain fans. The true fans are still with us. But the casual fans that would tune on, Wide World of Sports or USA Boxing or ESPN, they're not watching it as much. And that's sad.
We mentioned about obviously Thomas Hearns and obviously where you was with him and he was in the big fights. You mentioned the Four Kings. That's why we had the Four Kings because the best fought the best. Do you feel that's why boxing is potentially losing a bit of popularity and fan base now because the best aren't fighting the best? We're starting to see it a little bit more now with Saudi Arabia getting involved in their seemingly endless pot of money. But before Saudi got involved, we didn't really get to see the matchups we're getting now.
You're 100% right. You got it right on the money. There aren't fighters out there that the public is invested in. They don't know half of the people that we would talk about. They just don't know. If you ask the average boxing fan, and I've done this, and I know it for a fact, who's the heavyweight champion in the world? They go, oh, Mike Tyson. They haven't kept up with the sport. They don't know. They might know Floyd Mayweather, obviously, but there's no marquee names right now. There's no big stars in the sport that people are dying to see, and they know everything about them and they follow them. Back in the days, we knew everything about Sugar Ray Leonard, his little boy with his picture on his shoe. We knew Marvin Hagler from, what a tough guy he was. We knew Roberto Duran punched a mule or a horse, knocked him out in Panama. I mean, we knew things about the fighters. We were followers. Now, it's a lot harder to even find a casual fan who knows anybody. So it's you're right. It's very, very different. I wish it was like it used to be. There was so much more excitement. Now it seems an MMA fight card in most cities will outsell a local boxing card.
You worked with Thomas Hearns back in the late 70s, early 80s, James Toney in the 90s, and now with Mike Williams. Is it the hardest you've ever found it to manage a fighter now?
Oh, it's 100 times harder. Back in the day, I mean, Tommy fought all the time and he built his record. He had 18 first round knockouts in a row. James Toney in, I think, 1990 fought 10 times in 1 year. I mean, we had monthly fights here. I kept him busy. He fought every month unless he was tired or we wanted to rest him. But you could be 20-0 in 3 years. And it's taken 8 years with Mike Kwan to gather that many fights. Of course, we've had the pandemic, COVID shut everything down. And, there's hand injuries, things. It's just a completely different sport in a lot of ways. So building a fighter today is different. You need different tools. So even though I was a builder then and I'm a builder now, I had a different toolkit to work with back in James Toney, Tommy Hearns days than I have now with my fighters today. One of the things today is if you manage a fighter, you need a promoter. If you don't sign with a promoter, where are you going to take your fighter? Because the average promoter is only going to use his own fighters because why is he going to invest money to build a fighter that he has no signed contract with or no interest in? He would use those fighters as the B-side, as opponents for his own fighters. So either I would have to send my fighter out to be the B-side against a promoter's own fighter, or I have to sign with a promoter who will keep my fighter busy and use him as the A-side. So before I could sign 5, 6 fighters and call all different promoters and mix and match and put them on different cards. Nowadays, you can't do that. a guy in California is not going to fly my kid in from Detroit for a 4 or 6 round fight unless he's the opponent who comes in to fight the guy that he's really high on. So it's so much different now. So it's an interesting thing you brought that up because it's a lot harder today.
The last question, Jackie. We mentioned about you knew things about Roberto Duran, you knew things about Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, things like that back in the day, and that's what got people invested in them and their characters. Today we've got social media. Do you think social media has been a hindrance because we almost see too much about fighters today?
That must be what it is. That's a good thought. I didn't think about it because you would think with social media, we'd know everything. There's TikTok and there's Snapchat and there's, all the different social medias between Instagram and Facebook. You think you'd know everything. But if you don't know the fighter to begin with, you're not going to go look him up because you don't even know who he is. So a lot of people, when I mention who's your favorite fighter, they still come up with an older name, not a current name. And so I think social media helps within each fighter's own little fan base, but it's not as broad as it could be. And it's so interesting. I never thought about that. What a great question. I would think social media would make it just the opposite, wouldn't you?
You would have thought so in terms of accessibility, but
Interesting question.
perfect. Well, Jackie, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. Always a pleasure. I could speak to you all night long. But like I say, always a pleasure to have you on. And again, congratulations on the induction.
Thank you so much. And I'm always happy to talk to you. And your questions are always so interesting. You make the interview so much fun. So anytime you need me, call.
I will do, Jackie. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Bye.
See you later.